everyone, I'm Hannah Vaughan-Spruce. I'm a Consecrated Virgin in the Diocese of Southwark, and Consecrated Virginity is the oldest form of consecrated life in the Church. It goes right back to the early centuries of the Church. Saint Cecilia, Saint Agatha, Saint Agnes, those saints that we mention in the Eucharistic prayer, they were all consecrated virgins. This is before monasticism or religious life existed. And it took me a long time to discern consecrated virginity. I knew from when I was 17 that I felt Jesus calling me to belong to him in a special way. And through my 20s, I was discerning that call to celibacy. It's quite a hard thing to discern in your 20s. All your friends are getting married and it's hard not to just go down that path by default. But I kind of took myself away from all of that and really discerned this and felt that calling grow stronger within me. But I knew I felt called to remain in the world. I wasn't called to religious life and yet to belong completely to Jesus. And yet I couldn't find any examples of how women could live this life in the Church. And eventually I read an article of a consecrated virgin. It was in Cosmopolitan magazine, of all places, and it was a young woman who was consecrated in the United States. And I ended up getting in touch with her and discovered that there was a whole network of women living this around the world, and all kinds of resources to help me explore it. And so this is a way of life where you live your normal life within the world. You have a normal job, and yet you have a special vocation within your diocese to prayer in particular, and to service within the local church under the authority of your bishop. So today's Gospel is Mark 1:1-8, and when I was reading the Gospel, two things really stood out to me. One is the antiphon that is sung during the rite of consecration when a candidate to be consecrated is called by the bishop. She goes up the aisle to the sanctuary carrying a candle, and an antiphon is sung which is, "Behold, the bridegroom comes, go out and meet him." And this antiphon, I think, is really an antiphon for Advent, because we know the bridegroom is coming, that's certain, and all we need to do is go out and meet him. And I think this Gospel really sums that up so well. John the Baptist was the friend of the bridegroom and he was preparing the way. And the second thing that came to mind was, when a consecrated virgin is consecrated, one of the promises that we make is to be a convincing sign of the kingdom. And that's true of all consecrated life, that we're a sign of the kingdom. And again, this is what John the Baptist is in the Gospel today. He's a sign of that kingdom. There are two things as well that I am taking from the Gospel today, really from John the Baptist, because I think he's a great figure for consecrated life. One of them is the intimacy that a consecrated person needs with Christ. He is our all, he's everything to us. And this is what I've discovered over the past year. There's a new intimacy that I have with him, and I think a new intensity to living the Paschal mystery, so the life, death and resurrection of Christ. I think we kind of enter that into a new way, and I think that's something for Advent, that we can come closer to him in intimacy this Advent. And then the second thing that I'm taking from this Gospel from John the Baptist is his call to asceticism and that simplicity of life. And again, this is part of all consecrated life, because if our hearts are always full of things that clutter our hearts and our lives, kind of props that we've gathered that help us cope with our lives, then we're not empty to receive Jesus and to receive the life that he wants to pour into our hearts. And so again, I think Advent is a brilliant time to look into our hearts and to empty them. And sometimes that's uncomfortable, because sometimes the kind of poverty or the silence that we're left with is an uncomfortable place to be. But this is where we meet Jesus. Behold, the bridegroom comes, come out to meet him. That's where he wants to encounter us, in the kind of poverty and silence of our hearts. And I think that's our invitation as we draw through these weeks of Advent, to come close to Jesus, to empty our hearts, and knowing that in that emptiness he will come, he will fill it with his life and his love.